Ever since I was a child, I always had an innate fear of death. Strange, I know. Many times throughout my childhood, I thought about my great grandfather and what happened to him after he passed away. These ideas amalgamated, and I began to harbor a deep fear of what I should do in my own life to avoid a death like his. But as time went by, I grew past that stage and felt that I should just live my life while I could, and that's when I discovered Persona 3 a little while ago. To think that a life simulator with RPG elements could harbor such deep themes intrigued me, and I got the portable version for my PlayStation Vita. I'm gonna be honest, this game absolutely blew me out of the water. Compared to my earlier playthroughs of Persona 4 Golden, which conveniently I got for my PC when it released, it felt like I discovered a hidden gem, and as I went further in, it felt like a rabbit hole, piled to the brim with ideas of the human condition, and going through the various stages of grief over the span of an entire year. And this is what I think is the glue of Persona 3, the idea that holds it all together, and that idea is the gradual acceptance of death. The characters in any given story give it meaning and give it means to advance in a world. For our main character and wildcard persona user, we have Minato Arisato. I'm going with the manga name because I personally find it better and more interesting than Makoto Yuki, which is used in the movies. Unlike Joker or Yu Narukami from the later games, Minato is a character who develops throughout the story and isn't a total self-insert to allow the player to get into the story. His character arc begins with him arriving in his old town, utterly apathetic after moving from home to home ever since his parents died 10 years ago on the Moonlight Bridge before the events of the game. At the very start of the game, he's uncaring for others and even brushes off some social link characters as he doesn't see the point in human interaction. As he's almost forced into interaction by people such as Kenji, the magician social link, or Pharos, the death social link, he begins to see the world in a lighter tone and begins to interact with more and more people. And as we will see later on in the video, these people are also dealing with crushing situations such as Minato, and he begins to feel empathy with them. This idea will become more important later on. Junpei Iori, the best bro of the main character, doesn't feel as much of this pain early on, but begins his arc with mentioning his abusive family and wish to escape from the pain and suffering. But as the quote-unquote suave nature of these characters are, Junpei comes in contact with a Strega member, Chidori, who he begins to grow a massive infatuation with and eventually falls in love with her, which becomes reciprocated later on. But as the plot rises and Strega battles cease for the first time, Chidori watches as Junpei is shot by the Strega leader. She then rushes to Junpei's side and gives her life to Junpei. She even blames him for giving her a fear of death by the character growth both experience together through the story. Junpei soon faces his fears, with the dying Chidori in his arms, and he begins to grow as an individual, and his persona molds with Chidori's, symbolizing how together they were able to face their fear of death and not ignore it. In Chidori's case, or in Junpei's case, fear it.
I'll fight for what I believe in. That's what you would have wanted. Right, Dad?
Yukari's growth is not so subtle if you follow the events of her social link. Yukari's struggle is around her father's fate at the hands of Mitsuru's father's company, which inevitably led to her father dying as a result of messing with the Dark Hour. Yukari begins blaming Mitsuru for her father's death and accepts that Mitsuru had no control over what her family chose for Yukari's father. In her social link, you can see her blame her mother for not staying and weeping over her father's death, showing that everyone moved on besides Yukari. And as her progression is followed throughout the story, she finds a video of her father speaking on how Yukari must live and fight in the now, and not weep over the past, which causes an evolution in her persona, which forces her to confront an extremely different case of her father and accept that she can't only cry about the past, and now she must live and fight on, and he had to so she can continue living now. His arc focused around the death of his mother when he was younger, and how the old Cease member, Shinjiro, caused it accidentally by his persona going berserk and killing her.
It makes me happy to see everyone else happy too. So, I want us all to remain friends. The power to connect people even when they're apart. My persona has given me this amazing gift.
Fuka's growth is different from normal social links or party persona evolutions in that she doesn't realize how she should accept death, but more so that she should accept loss, and how even when people are apart, they can still innately be connected to one another, which can be shown as some sort of resolution or acceptance of oneself.
There's no need to worry, Father. I am not alone, and I'll never look back again.
Mitsuru's was sudden, but overall fit the narrative extremely well. Her struggle focused on the death of her father after he gave his life to save Cease from a traitor. Mitsuru afterwards was faced with a whiff of depression and failed to talk to her allies and connect with anyone else. But soon after speaking with Yukari about the futility of running away from your issues and the importance of standing up and facing your fears of loss and death, a new resolution awoke in Mitsuru when she realized she should live her life now and not run away from her issues, which is also brought up in her social link.
Thank you. I will be with you all, no matter what happens.
Aigis is also another character who has a more interesting take on accepting loss and death, in which she feels the loss within herself and her soul being dead as she is a robot and can't feel like a human. She has a resolution right before the deal Ryoji gives to Minato during New Year's Day, in which Aigis speaks with her allies about the events of her fight with Ryoji, where she apologizes for being useless and feels as though she can never amount to being a human, before Cease makes her feel better and makes her realize that she has made that change and that she is essentially human. This realization of her human-like existence made her promise to herself that she would keep learning and keep the more human side of herself, while still accepting the robot side.
Give yourself time. Let your anger be your strength. Come on, kid. You're just a kid. You've got your whole life ahead of you, so don't waste it. Make it your own. Okay?
Ken is an extremely different case to other characters, mostly due to his age, and the fact that he's only around an elementary schooler and he had to face death very early on. His arc focused around the death of his mother when he was younger, and how the old Cease member, Shinjiro, caused it accidentally by his persona going berserk and killing her, which leads him to use his rage to get revenge on Shinjiro later on. This arc was very story related, and the events of the October full moon led to the leader of Strega, Takaya, shooting and killing Shinjiro after Ken and Shinjiro face off in an abandoned alleyway. This grim reality forces Ken to realize his struggle twice, and he overall grows as an individual because he faces his distorted mindset of wanting to get revenge and comes to the resolution that nothing can bring back his mother and Shinjiro, and that they will always be gone, but he must keep living for their sake.
Crying won't change anything, will it? Alright, Shinji. You watch from there with Miki. I still have things to do, right?
Akihiko's resolution was, in my opinion, the most heartbreaking, but one of the strongest moments of acceptance one character faced in Persona 3. His evolution began around the time of Shinjiro's death, and, almost like a soliloquy, he speaks to Shinjiro's memorial while lamenting on his good times with him, before he realizes that crying won't change anything. This idea pulls him back on his feet, and he finds a new reason to fight, for Shinjiro and Ken's mother. The female main character also gets a small section in this for showing gender roles, especially when dealing with grief. The male main character deals with grief by shouldering it all on him silently, which opposes the more upbeat and more expressive female main character, whose attitude also represents the acceptance of death as the 22nd Arcana, or the end of a journey. Other social link characters must face this reality as well. Characters such as Akinari, the Sun Arcana social link, and his literal acceptance of death as he faces a terminal illness, or the bookstore owners from the Hierophant Arcana, and them accepting their son's death and trying to preserve his memory. Many themes are present in future Persona games, but in my opinion, Persona 3 handles their core theme and reveals them without shoehorning any aspects of it in character-wise. The gameplay and mechanics present in Persona 3 further this idea of death and the inevitability of existence. This section might be a little shorter than the rest, but we'll still go over the main aspects of the mechanics of this game. The very act of summoning a persona in the game is proving of its main theme. The way to summon a persona in this game is for one to conquer their fear of death to reach new heights with their abilities by shooting themselves in the head with a fake gun. The attributes of this fake gun, or evoker, as the cast calls it, is that it weighs the same as a real gun, makes the same sound when cocking, and the trigger pulls similar to a real handgun. This could also be a metaphor to gun control and how many lives were taken due to the terrible misuse of weaponry, but for the purposes of this video, we will focus on the core idea of the weapon. The evoker was first shown in the opening of Persona 3 in use by Yukari, who points it at her head while furiously sweating in the opening of the game, showing her utter fear of death. This can also demonstrate the character's indifference to death itself by using the evoker quickly and understanding the properties of using it when he first summons his persona, Orpheus. Evokers are used constantly in the game and become less and less of an amazement due to the audience and cast getting used to what the evokers symbolize, and that is an acceptance of death, which even the cast begins to accept when they go into Tartarus in the Dark Hour more with their evokers. A big idea shown throughout the story is the main dungeon itself, Tartarus, a place in Greek mythology symbolizing a place of pain and suffering for the wicked, which is shown in the game as a spiraling building leading into the heavens, which can represent its distorted nature and the distorted nature of death itself. Another major quote-unquote flaw is the punishing and unfair difficulty presented in the game, with enemies using insta-kill Hama and Mudo spells and using high-level skills at low level. This is a point of contention for future Persona games, but for Persona 3, this difficulty can be seen as another way to display its idea of death. In the game, death is unfair and happens blindly, with you instantly dying sometimes at the start of a fight, or enemies spamming the same attack until your entire party dies. With the mechanics of fighting, it lines in well with the story of the cast and the other social link characters. Characters like Akinari, who got the illness unfairly, or Ken losing his mother due to a freak accident show how even a flaw with the game can prove a theme just through the gameplay itself. Personas are an important part of the game. Who would have guessed? It's not like it's in the title. These ethereal beings represent the internal and fighting spirit of the one who wields them. In most cases, the user only has access to one, but some exceptions like the main character in Persona 3, 4, and 5, and Aegis from The Answer, are known as wildcard users, who can wield an infinite amount of them. Each one is special, and many are based on gods, like Junpei's persona, Hermes, the messenger of the gods, who aids those who travel to the underworld, or in this game's idea, Tartarus, the path one must take in order to face death. Others like Mitsuru, whose persona also ties into death and suffering, has the persona Penthesilea, who is an Amazonian queen who was slain by Achilles, who fell in love with her and was forced to kill her. An interesting persona and its evolution was Akihiko's, who wields Polydeuces, which transforms into Caesar after he conquers his fear of death. Polydeuces was a man who was born of immortality, while his brother Castor was born mortal, so he pleaded to the gods to let them both live forever, which soon turned them both into the Gemini constellation. This pre-evolution persona could represent him not being able to see through his life to the end without his friends by his side, but his evolved persona, Caesar, could show his growth. Caesar represented a life well lived, and a life lived through to the end, and even though it ended brutally, it still showed his glorious existence and acceptance of fate and death as a cycle. A really compelling and interesting link between party personas is that of Shinjiro's persona, Castor. If you were listening to what I said a few seconds ago, I mentioned Akihiko's persona's origin, which was that of the tale of Polydeuces and Castor, one born immortal and the other born mortal. Castor, or Shinjiro, who was born mortal, died, whereas Polydeuces, or Akihiko, lived on and had to attend to his duties. This parallel of death and fate between two brothers became literal for duos such as Akihiko and Shinjiro, which isn't shown that much later on in other Persona games. Finally, for the main character, he has Orpheus as a starting persona. This persona originated from Greek mythology, where Orpheus was a master of music, especially on the lyre. His wife soon died and he made a tragic journey to the underworld in order to save her, which ended up in her dying once again due to his misdeeds and his acceptance of him having to live on without his wife. This theme could be paralleled in the main character's journey for his happiness back, which he can't achieve, which leads to his apathy and disconnect from enjoying his life, and this is expanded by him finding a purpose fighting with Seas, which allows him to live on and eventually finding a purpose at the end of his journey. His other persona, which is literally born from Orpheus in the first battle, is aptly named Thanatos, or the god of death. The only difference from other death gods in other religions is that Thanatos is the Greek god of peaceful death, and the son of Nyx, who is the main villain of the story. Thanatos appears several times as the death sealed within Minato, and is the death that is most present in Persona 3. The ideas of Thanatos and his ability in Persona 3 is very apparent in many sub-stories, such as the peaceful and fulfilled death of Akinari, or the very death of the main character that happens at the end of the game and the end of the journey, who rested for eternity peacefully surrounded by his newfound friends. The music choice in Persona 4 is vastly different from the brooding Shin Megami Tensei and Persona 1 and 2 counterparts, and still happens to contain a deep theme through early 2000s rock and hip-hop. The very first thing we can see as we boot up Persona 3 is the infamous opening, Burn My Dread. The very title conveys the listener the importance of burning one's own dread or their existential dread of death. The lyrics contain many references to a fear of death and the eventual acceptance of it. Many are figurative and others are extremely literal. During the chorus, the singer shouts, "I once ran away from the god of fear, and he chained me to despair. Burn my dread, I will break the chain." This verse conveys how the cast and Minato must face their fear of death, and running away only chain them to a cycle of despair over and over and over again. Other songs convey this idea well, with Tartarus' growing and building theme, and how it almost becomes angelic as you scale it. It demonstrates the peaceful yet violent ascension to heaven as one goes up all 200 plus floors of Tartarus. My personal favorite battle theme from all the games, and the hip switch up of past battle themes, was Mass Destruction. The fact that it was still present in the game, even with all the moody and sulky themes and songs, shows that Lotus Juice, the rapper, can rap in literally any Persona song and still make it flow extremely well. But my overall favorite ending theme is perhaps Kimi no Kyoku, the credits theme that plays at the end of Minato's journey. It perfectly encapsulates his and our journey, as the song proclaims that a peaceful death is something no one should fear, and the long journey of life one has taken to reach the very moment of their death. Accepting death is an extremely hard subject to tackle, especially in a medium such as video games, due to the attachment one must have with the cast in order to feel what they feel, and I think Persona 3 pulled this idea off extremely well, from the overall cast and the struggles, the gameplay mechanics, the persona design and function, and the music. Every part of the journey resonates with the player due to how much they experienced from Minato's eyes, and the friends they made and the characters they had to make a farewell to partway in. The finale truly showed the fight we and Minato had to give in order to stop the almighty incarnation of death itself and Minato's soul, which he ended up using to seal death away forever. Then, as the curtains begin to close on the story and see Minato get weaker, we begin to feel this peaceful farewell to him as his eyes get heavier and heavier, and after an entire year of making friends and saying goodbye to others, we make our final goodbye to Minato, and then finally, after his entire journey, he rests his eyes for the last time.
歌う世界を君の手で守ったから今はただ翼を畳んでゆっくり眠りなさい永遠の安らぎに